Hey guys, welcome back to Wrest News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling, so let's get straight into today's first story. Update on AEW All Out main event plans. With the announcement of Jon Moxley and CM Punk meeting on AEW Dynamite, a new report has shed light on the main event plans for All Out. CM Punk ascended to the top of the wrestling world again when he captured the AEW World Championship from Hangman Adam Page at Double or Nothing. Punk's joy was short-lived, however, as a foot injury took him out of action for several months, causing him to miss the Forbidden Door pay-per-view. In his absence, Jon Moxley was crowned the interim AEW World Champion and has had quite the run as stand-in champion. CM Punk returned to AEW on August 10th, helping the Blackpool Combat Club see off the threat of the Jericho Appreciation Society before turning his attention to Moxley. On the following week's Dynamite, the two men clashed in a promo segment that turned very physical. During the night, the highly anticipated match between the two stars to crown an undisputed AEW World Champion was announced for the upcoming All Out pay-per-view, but by the end of the night that had changed. Instead, it was announced Punk and Moxley will clash on Dynamite live in Cleveland on the 24th of August. Dave Meltzer, writing for the Wrestling Observer, however, has said that the plan for All Out is to still have Moxley and Punk meet on the pay-per-view. Meltzer notes that this is not 100% guaranteed, but there is currently no backup plan for the presumed main event of the show. Meanwhile, it has also been reported that want-away AEW star MJF could be returning to the company sooner rather than later. This is a really interesting one, isn't it? Knowing that the assumption was when CM Punk returned, when he made his surprise return after Moxley had defended the interim world championship against Chris Jericho, the assumption was, well, it's going to be CM Punk versus Jon Moxley. You've got the world champion and the interim world champion. You've got it All Out being one of AEW's biggest shows of the year. You've got it being in Chicago. It makes total sense that the championship unification match will be the main event in one of the biggest shows of the year in AEW's arguably their strongest market outside Jacksonville, which is their home base. It made total sense that Punk versus Moxley would be the main event. So when it was announced last week that it was going to be the championship unification match happening this coming week on Dynamite, I scratched my head a lot, and I think a lot of people scratch their head going, where are they going with this? The reason why people are scratching their heads so much is, one, obviously it feels rushed, but two, AEW historically hasn't done many screwy finishes, i.e. they don't tend to book matches where you don't get an affirmative outcome. They've occasionally done it, they've occasionally done DQs, they've occasionally done countouts, but they don't use it as a crutch like WWE have done in the past. Obviously, things can change under Triple H, but I still think they might go down that route quite often. If this was WWE, when they said, oh, we're going to have the championship unification match next week, you'd go, well, I know for a fact we're not seeing a finish there. We're going to see some kind of screwy finish. They're doing it for ratings. They're doing it to get people watching, and we definitely aren't going to have an outcome. But with AEW, they don't tend to do that. However, I think that is going to be the case. I think we're going to see some form, clearly, of screwy finish, unless the only way that I see an affirmative outcome, i.e. CM Punk wins and is the undisputed AEW World Champion, or Jon Moxley wins and becomes the undisputed AEW World Champion, is if they're just going to do a rematch All Out. If they're going to do a rematch, i.e. maybe Moxley wins and does unify both championships and becomes the undisputed AEW World Champion, and in the process CM Punk turns heel, and then they have the match at All Out where Moxley's the undisputed World Champion and Punk's the heel, but in his hometown of Chicago, kind of similar to Money in the Bank in 2011 when he faced John Cena, although it's not really totally the same. But they have that match, and then Punk wins, and then maybe MJF returns. That's how they do it. Or another outcome they could do, and I guess this one kind of makes a bit of sense too, is that how did the match come about in the first place? The match came about in the first place of being so early was that last week on Dynamite, or this week rather on Dynamite, they brawled to start the show, and then a few segments later they brawled again, and the explanation they gave on commentary was, these guys are fighting all the time, they can't wait until Chicago for All Out, we have to do it next week, because otherwise it's going to be chaos, it's going to be panic, it's going to be disorder in All Elite Wrestling, we have to get it done now, we have to find out who the undisputed world champion is, and maybe what they'll do is try tried to have the match on Dynamite on Wednesday, but they can't have the match on Dynamite on Wednesday because these two guys, they hate each other so much that they do go to a double disqualification, or before the bell's even rung, they're brawling and the match can't even get underway, and there's blood and there's violence. I mean, it's AEW, there's blood every single week on Dynamite, and then they have to put some kind of gimmick on top of it, and that main event in Chicago becomes obviously an undisputed unification match, but on top of that, it's, I don't know, inside of a steel cage or a new match, or it's a ladder match. I don't know what they would do. Maybe they go down that route and they have that kind of match. They have to add some kind of stipulation, which again would not be surprising at all, because one of my biggest criticisms of AEW is it feels like every match every single week has to be a gimmick. They've got to have a gimmick match. They've got to have extra violence, and I like violence. I'm a big ECW fan from back in the day, but not every match needs it, especially on weekly television. But maybe they go down that route of, we tried to have the match on TV, but we couldn't because they were brawling so much, so we're going to have a stipulation match. Or the other outcome, so you've got sort of three outcomes I'm putting here. One is that we do have a clean finish, and either Moxley or Punk becomes the champion. Let's say Moxley becomes the champion, Punk turns heel, and they just have a rematch. They have the rematch at All Out because there's some kind of big angle that they do. The second one is that they tried to have the match, but for whatever reason we don't get a finish, i.e. the match doesn't start, or there's a disqualification, or there's a count out, so they have the match in Chicago, but there's a stipulation added. Or three, and this is the third option, is that CM Punk wins, because I think the most likely outcome is that Punk wins. In general, maybe not in this match on this event, because I did think there'd probably be a non-finish. But Punk wins the match. He turns heel in the process, and he unifies the championships. And then we see a returning MJF, who is the anti-hero now in AEW. Of course, Punk's being built up as sort of the corporate champion, if you believe these reports about Hangman Page and being in Tony Khan's ear and leveraging threats and walkouts and all this kind of stuff against Tony Khan. Of course, CM Punk was the one that ran MJF off when MJF did the pipe bomb promo just after Double or Nothing. So you have CM Punk win. He turns heel in the process. Out comes MJF. MJF confronts him and says, hey, I just signed a new contract with AEW, and as per stipulations in my new contracts, I get the first shot at you in Chicago for the AEW World Championship. And by the way, the last time we faced off in Chicago, I won, and I'm going to win again, and this time I'm going to become the AEW World Champion, and I'm going to knock some of these ex-WWE guys out of All Elite Wrestling. So that's where I think this is going. I think, to be honest, the most likely outcome is a non-finish, leading to a stipulation at All Out. We could, though, have Moxley win, and we have just a rematch at All Out. We could have, as I mentioned, a non-finish, which leads to a stipulation match at All Out. Or we have CM Punk win and MJF makes his return, and then they build to a match in Chicago for the AEW World Championship. Let me know which one you think it will be. CM Punk calls his first year in AEW the best year of his career. 1 year later, CM Punk says his AEW run is the best of his career so far. August 20, 2021, CM Punk returned to pro wrestling after 7.5 years away at AEW Rampage The First Dance in Chicago. In his first year, CM Punk was afforded opportunities to team with Sting, reconnect with his Ring of Honor roots, win another World Championship, and even wear long boys. Now, CM Punk has taken to social media to reflect on his first year, calling it the best year of his career in a post on Instagram. Quote, 1 year ago began the best year of my professional career. Too many great moments, not enough space to post all the great pics. Rekindled passion, made new friends, reunited with old ones. Can't stop smiling, won't stop until the wheels fall off. Thank you, most of all, to the fans who made it possible. I'm having the time of my life, as there's a drive into deep left field by Castanelos, and that'll be a home run. And so that'll make it a 4-0 ball game. CM Punk will face Jon Moxley on Wednesday, August 24, in order to unify the AEW World Championships. In his first promo since returning from injury, Punk stirred the pot and verbally attacked Moxley, Eddie Kingston, and Hangman Adam Page. Ah yes, CM Punk. Now, I did think, when we heard all of that big story from Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select, talking about Punk's possible unhappiness, how there were those close to him that didn't think he was going to show up this week for AEW Dynamite, and he was unhappy with Hangman Page. There was heat between him and Hangman Page. I was waiting for Punk's response, and you know what? Timing is everything in pro wrestling, and sometimes things they're a layup, aren't they? It's just perfect situation, it's the perfect circumstance, it's the perfect time, and that's exactly what it is, because of course this week is the 1 year anniversary of Punk making his AEW debut at Rampage, the United Center, the first dance, sellout crowd, sold out based on a rumor, and since then, this is really the perfect time to have a bit of a reflection. Punk's been reflecting, calling it the best year of his professional career, saying that he's reignited his passion, he's rekindled relationships, he's made new friends, and he's having the best time, which of course goes completely against some of those reports that came out, specifically that one from Fightful last week that said that Punk was unhappy and having meetings with Tony Khan, and he might not have showed up to Dynamite on Wednesday, and whilst he didn't outright claim he was going to quit, some people thought that's the direction that he was going in. It's very contradictory to all of that. So now is the perfect time to really reflect on that year, on this year, and Punk came back and he said one of his big priorities was he wanted to work with all of this younger talent. Get this younger talent over. Make them stars. Compete with WWE. So let's have a look. Who has Punk worked with in this year, and are they any better off for working with him? Now we're talking about sort of big feuds here, and maybe a couple of select matches. But you look at, Darby Allin, that first feud. Did Darby Allin come off better because of that? The answer is really no. Darby Allin now, since then, he's sort of toiled in feuds that haven't really meant that much. He's had some decent matches, but was Darby Allin elevated because of that match? That was a huge spot for Darby Allin. CM Punk's first match, 7 years Chicago. Enjoyed the match. I would have liked maybe to see more of that feud because we really didn't see a lot of it. Punk came back. There was a couple of promos back and forth, and it was exciting that Darby was the first match that Punk would have back because there was kind of similarities-ish between them, straight edge and all that kind of alternative lifestyle. But the match was fine, but we didn't see a ton of it. I mean, afterwards they teamed up a few times. If anything, the people that got over most out of the Punk and Darby feud and program was CM Punk and Sting, because they developed a great relationship and they're friends now, and it kind of felt like Darby was secondary to all of that. So you look at that. What other matches has Punk had? He had a match against Powerhouse Hobbs on the Grand Slam edition of Rampage in Arthur Ashe Stadium, and that was fine, I guess. That was fine. I think Hobbs looked good in that match. It's only now, though, that maybe Hobbs is getting the spotlight on him, and I don't know if that had anything to do really with the Punk match. Probably not, actually. It's more to do with the rise of Ricky Starks, if anything. So I don't think it really positively affected Powerhouse Hobbs. The next feud, the big one, of course, was MJF, and I do think Punk helped elevate MJF. Now, MJF was elevating himself, it must be said. I think that Punk was the perfect opponent. Two guys, great on the mic. Their promo battles were fantastic. Their matches were always great. The match they had in Chicago, I thought was fantastic. The dog collar match they had also at Revolution, I thought was fantastic. Of course, it facilitated the feud between MJF and Wardlow, which I thought was very good as well. So that was a tick. That helped. I think MJF really got over by himself, but being in that program with CM Punk benefited him. Goes on to facing Hangman Page in the next program. Did it help get Hangman Page over anymore? I mean, Hangman Page's feud, or rather his reign as the AEW World Champion, was one of, if not the weakest, I believe, of the AEW World Championship reigns. He wasn't really totally presented as a strong world champion, in my opinion. Did that feud do anything for him? Not really. Not really. It just brought an end to a championship reign that wasn't that great. And of course, there's heat now because of it. And now he's going into this feud with Jon Moxley. Now, Moxley doesn't need to be elevated. He's already over anyway. But in this year, has Punk moved the needle? You would say no. In the sort of short term, he did, certainly for that Rampage and for the following edition of Dynamite, but a year later, the ratings are slightly worse off. Would you say his run's a failure? No, because there's many metrics that he has moved the needle. Every pay-per-view he's been on has been near record business for that pay-per-view for AEW. AEW's pay-per-view model is very, very strong. and Punk's been on all of their pay-per-views, so it's difficult to say. I did miss out the Eddie Kingston feud, it must be said as well, because he had the feud with Eddie Kingston at Full Gear before I move on. And I did really enjoy that, it must be said. Like, it's not to say that Punk's feuds and matches haven't been good, because they've all been very good and very entertaining. But the talent he'd worked with, were they better off for working with CM Punk? It's difficult to say. The Eddie Kingston one, I felt like he was. I felt at the time that he was elevated because he became a real strong babyface because of it. And then he worked with Jericho and he's kind of sort of moved to the side a little bit. Of course, he got an injury through that. So it's tough to say. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How would you grade CM Punk's first year in AEW? Major update on AEW reportedly adding another show to its lineup. A blockbuster update regarding AEW to get a brand new television show has surfaced. Tony Khan has elevated All Elite Wrestling to newer horizons in just 3 years of the promotion's existence. Khan's consistent efforts have cemented the Jacksonville-based promotion as a legitimate counter-product to WWE. Apart from a Wednesday-bound Dynamite, Rampage and Dark have created a streamlined flow of wrestling products. However, many believe that a combined TV time of 7 hours doesn't do justice to the enormous roster currently under contract to All Elite Wrestling. Many stars have subtly hinted at being underutilized under Tony Khan's leadership. However, renowned journalist Dave Meltzer aired a significant update that might serve as a solution to this growing problem. Speaking on Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer revealed that a new television show is reportedly on the cards for AEW. Quote, "They are going to get another television show, AEW. They are going to get another television show. We know about the reality show, and if they remain successful, their prospects of getting another show are there, and they have the roster. In theory, all you gotta do is have these guys work one match a week," said Meltzer. Vince McMahon's departure invoked several management changes in WWE meanwhile. With Triple H as a new creative head, speculation of many discontented stars moving to WWE has been doing the rounds. During the same edition of Wrestling Observer Radio, Meltzer opinionated that a new show could counter WWE's murmurs in the locker room. Quote, "Some of these guys are working every other week, every third week, every fourth week, so there's so much you could do. It's going to be a lot harder to book, with more shows, but yes, for both companies, I could see more shows. I could see there's going to be a pushback from the companies. If somebody offers the right deal, and someone will for WWE, they're going to think about it," Meltzer added. While AEW has yet to issue an official statement regarding the new television show, when it is officially announced, it might prove to be a game changer for Tony Khan's promotion and pro wrestling in general. Right, a new TV show for AEW. It must be said that when I saw this story, I do think it's somewhat misleading. Essentially what Meltzer is saying here, and you have to always do this with Dave Meltzer, you can't confuse his opinion for fact. And so many people struggle to disseminate the two. They think that everything Dave Meltzer says is a report, and it isn't. A lot of the time, Dave Meltzer is speculating, he is sharing his opinion, and they take that as fact, and that is what is happening. And then, in fairness to Meltzer, they will then blame Meltzer when it doesn't happen, and it's a case of, well, he was speculating. But also, you could say, Meltzer, then why would you, can you clarify when you're speculating here? Can you not talk as if everything is factual, if everything is a report? He's basically saying here that if AEW remains successful, the prospects of getting a new show are there. And in theory, they have all of the pieces to do it. Right now, AEW does not need another show. Absolutely, they do not. The roster needs another show. And this is the important clarification here. AEW does not need a new show. The ratings prove that at the moment. The viewership proves that. You have Dark Elevation, which are the YouTube properties and they're more developmental properties. They're fine. They are what they are. In terms of television shows on cable television, which is what Meltzer is talking about here, you have Dynamite, which is the flagship show, and it does well. It does do well. Even though the ratings are slightly down, it's still number one on cable most weeks out of the year. Depends on sports competition, cable news competition, but that is what that is. Rampage started off well. It is dying. It is dying on Friday nights. That 10 p.m. slot not being live absolutely kills it off. They have to switch it somehow, move it to a Saturday, make it live, make it 2 hours, and maybe, just maybe, they'll be able to revive that show. But also, part of the issue of Rampage as well is that not only is it in a bad time slot, not only is it taped so everyone knows what's going to happen anyway, it's 2022, social media exists, but 3, they don't really put anything that good on it. It's not a show that you go, well, even though it's taped, I have to watch this. That's not the case. Most of the stuff happens on there isn't that great. You don't really feel like you have to tune in because nothing really of substance is happening. So AEW has to fix what they already have before they want to add to it, in my opinion. But again, this is assuming that everything is going to stay as it is with AEW and Discovery Warner Media. They're going to be entering television negotiations soon, and dependent on what the ratings are saying then will depend on if they get renewed, let alone if the deal gets expanded upon. Now, I expect they will get renewed. Whether or not they'll get expanded upon, I don't know. As I mentioned, AEW doesn't need a new show right now. One brand that does, though, is Ring of Honor. Now, if they can work out a deal to have Ring of Honor to be a Discovery Warner Media property, that will be positive for AEW/ROH. One, because they've got a brand here without a show, and for that brand to really truly exist, Tony Khan said he's exploring it, he's discussing possibilities with their partners, and that's what he means. If AEW gets a show before Ring of Honor, then there's no point acquiring that apart from a television library. And I think the hope was previously it would go on HBO Max or something like that. That ain't gonna exist anymore. So that's changed. The Discovery Warner Media merger has changed a lot. And it kind of reminds me of Time Warner AOL. Not in the same, because by all accounts, Warner Media still wants to have pro wrestling, but it's something certainly to consider for Tony Khan. So if they are going to get another show, it has to be Ring of Honor for me. As Dave Meltzer does say, and he's right with this, even though it's his opinion, they've got the roster for it. So that's a big problem that AEW has at the moment. Well, Tony Khan has. He's got this huge roster, and there is, even with all of these shows, there is still only a select amount of television time available, and people are getting unhappy. People are disgruntled. You look at Miro, you look at Andrade El Idolo, you look at a lot of other people. You look at the people that, when they leave AEW, they go, thank God I'm on the independent scene again because I can work. I'm getting flown to television every single week, but I'm not doing anything. So those that would be part of the Ring of Honor brand and the Ring of Honor weekly TV show, they'd be regularly working. I do think there needs to be some separation. There are so many champions in AEW, on AEW television every single week, just that, including the Ring of Honor champions, it's kind of too much. So I'd want to see some separation, i.e., if Claudio Castagnoli is the Ring of Honor World Champion, which he is right now, he shouldn't be on AEW programming, in my opinion. Keep them separate, keep them special, present them differently. I don't know if that's what Tony Khan wants to do. I feel like at the moment, these Ring of Honor stars are being kept on AEW television just to constantly remind everyone what Ring of Honor is and that a Ring of Honor TV show is coming soon. So my hope would be that we don't see another AEW show, but we do see a Ring of Honor show. And again, this is a wrestling show. This isn't a reality show. We know reality shows are coming. Like Roads to the Top, etc. was previously, but we're talking about an actual wrestling show. So fingers crossed, it's Ring of Honor. But what are your thoughts on today's AEW news stories? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right hand corner, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.